Good evening and welcome to News Review. Gibraltar this week was granted the second highest rating for transparency and exchange of information by the OECD at the Global Forum in Berlin. This puts the ROC in the same band as 26 other countries or territories, including the UK and Germany.
The OECD rates countries and territories by analysing 10 elements, such as accounting, network of agreements, access power and the rights and safeguards of parties. Phase 1 of the evaluation of Gibraltar's global tax transparency was carried out in 2012, and the ROC moved on to Phase 2. In this latest report, Gibraltar is rated as compliant in 7 of the elements, and largely compliant in 3. Recommendations have been made so that Gibraltar can tick the boxes for those 3 categories in the future. The overall rating was largely compliant, the second highest rating on the roster. In a general report compiled by the OECD last November, 26 countries fell under that category, including the UK, Germany, the USA, Greece, Jersey, Guernsey and Monaco. 17 countries, including Spain, Australia, Denmark, New Zealand, Norway and China, rated entirely compliant. Only 2 countries were partially compliant, and 4 of them were non-compliant: the British Virgin Islands, Luxembourg, Seychelles and Cyprus. The Chief Minister, who is in Berlin for the forum, has said this is a magnificent result for Gibraltar and a vindication of Gibraltar's position on international cooperation. He said legislative steps were already underway to address the recommendations in the report, so that in a future review, Gibraltar can be 100% compliant in all the essential elements. For his part, Financial Services Minister Albert Isola said the months of hard work by officials had paid off handsomely. He said the OECD report provided Gibraltar with an entirely credible third-party assessment of its excellent track record in international cooperation and compliance.
Gibraltar may unilaterally ask the OECD to look at the ROC's processes when it's dealt with the areas that fall short of full compliance. Speaking to GBC following the publication of the OECD Phase 2 peer review report on Gibraltar, the Chief Minister said we should not underestimate the huge value of being largely compliant and who we're largely compliant with. Fabian Picardo said legislation needs to make the jurisdiction compliant but not uncompetitive.
Well, people in the financial services sector know that we've already entered into something called US FATCA, and the same with the United Kingdom, which is automatic exchange of information agreements done between the United States and different entities, different countries, like Gibraltar, like the United Kingdom, etc., all entering into direct agreements with the United States. A similar agreement has been promoted by the United Kingdom with the Crown dependencies and the overseas territories and the United Kingdom. Within the European Union, there is a directive which is more or less of the same effect, and we are at the forefront of complying with that directive because we, as you know, transpose directives ahead of most other European nations. And this is just the international equivalent of that type of FATCA exchange agreement, but it is open to all the world to form part of. And what we had yesterday in Berlin were the 50 early adopters that included some of the main economies in the world, like the United Kingdom and Germany, and the Crown dependencies and all of the overseas territories which have significant financial services presences, including Gibraltar.
Also this week, a new online Al-Qaeda magazine is encouraging militants to blow up oil tankers and hijack cargo ships passing through the Strait of Gibraltar. The MOD said it was aware of the threats, adding it trains for and is prepared to deal with a range of scenarios, but that for operational security reasons, it would not be prudent to provide details. Its security arrangements, it says, are kept under constant review. For its part, the Gibraltar government expressed confidence that every precaution possible will be taken.
The predominantly English-language Resurgence magazine says Islamic fighters are located favourably to carry out attacks against strategic waterways, like the Strait of Hormuz in the Persian Gulf, the Suez Canal and the Strait of Gibraltar. In Gibraltar's case, it urges Mujahideen fighters on the Moroccan side of the strait to strike. In an article titled "On Targeting the Achilles Heel of Western Economies," Resurgence claims that an attack on even a single supertanker in one of the maritime choke points could have phenomenal negative economic consequences for the West. The Sunday Express says the Ministry of Defence confirmed it was aware of the threats and would act accordingly. Meanwhile, a Gibraltar government spokesman noted that defence and security in British Gibraltar territorial waters are the responsibility of the UK. He added that it's to be expected that those responsible for security in the region would take every precaution possible.
In other news, former Gibraltar Euro MP Sir Graham Watson has been granted a 3-year contract to head the Gibraltar government's office in Brussels. Initially, he will work from the government's existing office until new, better appointed premises have been acquired. He's expected to start off with 3 or 4 members of staff, but says the issue is not size, but effectiveness, adding that a team of committed individuals can achieve a lot.
The choice of ex-Liberal Democrat MEP Sir Graham Watson will come as no surprise to anyone who follows local politics. Sir Graham had represented Gibraltar in the European Parliament since Gibraltar first took part in Euro elections in 2004 as part of the South West England constituency, and had come to be seen as a staunch supporter of the Rock. Despite topping the local poll in last May's European election with a massive 67% of the votes, one of only 4 counting areas across the whole of the UK in which the Lib Dems did so, Sir Graham narrowly lost his seat to the Greens. Since then, he's been widely touted as the ideal person to spearhead the Gibraltar government's EU campaign. Speaking to GBC, Sir Graham said the government's decision to place Gibraltar higher up the radar screen in Brussels is a good idea.
I found it an uphill struggle, and I think there's a long way to go. Clearly, the government of Gibraltar has recognised that it needs to put resources into making sure the territory's voice is heard. We have 6 members of the European Parliament representing Gibraltar. My job will be to work with them, perhaps to encourage them to do things for the territory, and to make sure, of course, that the territory's voice is heard in the European Commission and in the other councils of government.
Number 6 Convent Place says Sir Graham will be responsible for leading and directing the lobbying activities of the government in Brussels, as well as liaising with the UK's permanent representation to the EU. He'll also be charged with facilitating the promotion of business in Gibraltar from Brussels.
We knew that there were many people trying to obtain his services. He has a great expertise in many areas, having been a member of Parliament in the European Union for 20 years. We have been able to secure his service. He will head up the Gibraltar office. I think the fact that the people of Gibraltar gave him 60% of the votes of Gibraltar at the last European election reflect the confidence that people here have in him. The government has the same confidence. We think he is the right man to really raise the profile of Gibraltar in Brussels and to look after our interests within the structure of the European Union, the Commission, and the way that the Parliament interact now. I think that allows him to really try and influence things for Gibraltar.
I think it's a role that sees itself as promotion of Gibraltar in general, in political terms and in business terms. Obviously, it will not be a political role in the sense that I'm not an elected politician. It will be working with Gibraltar's elected politicians to make sure that the territory has a clear and consistent voice in the upper echelons of the European Union.
Sir Graham's first job will be to get to grips with the new Commission and the new MEPs and get to know them all. After that, he said, it's important that they're fully briefed.
Well, I think it will involve doing many of the things that I did while I was a member of the European Parliament, but doing them in a professional capacity. And that means making sure that Gibraltar's needs are understood in Brussels, making sure that if there is legislation that will affect Gibraltar, then Gibraltar's voice is heard before that legislation comes into place, making sure that Gibraltar businesses are aware of the opportunities of Brussels for promotion of the territory's business.
Sir Graham was granted the freedom of the city of Gibraltar this year.
Gibraltar will not be affected by a Monarch Airlines restructure, which will see 700 redundancies and 8 aircraft retired from the fleet. The airline has gone through major changes in the last 2 months following the takeover by Grey Bull Capital LLP. But it will be keeping all its European short-haul links, including Gibraltar.
In late September, the Monarch Group announced the Mantegazza family, the group's main shareholders, had sold their stock to Grey Bull Capital, a multinational investor company. Just 1 day later, staff groups voted to support restructuring plans which would evolve Monarch into a European low-cost airline. This will mean dropping long-haul flights and retiring 8 Boeing 757 aircraft. Original forecasts showed potentially 900 redundancies, which were then cut back to 700. These will be predominantly cabin crew among the long-haul craft. The good news for Gibraltar is that short-haul destinations won't be affected, and neither should the links between Gibraltar and the UK. A spokesperson for the company confirmed to GBC that Gibraltar is a popular destination for Monarch, and the company plans to build on Birmingham and Manchester as central hubs. Monarch currently offers flights between the Rock and these two airports. The airline is also currently considering expanding routes which only fly twice a week, so that clients can make the most of weekend travel.
And we'll be back with more of this week's news after this break.